What's going on, guys? Evan back at you, Data Unmasked, with a new video. Recently, I put out a survey on Twitter asking you, our viewers, what you wanted to see in our very first video coming at you on YouTube. The responses 100% were for a database tutorial. Now, keep in mind, I only got one response, but this is our first video. So today, we're going to be walking through using Postgres. And I'm not talking about putting Postgres just on localhost, maybe being able to turn it on in PgAdmin, write a select star from test database 1. This is going to be, we're going to use Postgres like you would use it in a production environment, either in the development as a part of like a microservice architecture, or maybe even if you're looking to set up Postgres as a warehouse and you want to run this with infrastructure as code, this is where you're going to learn how to do that. All that and more coming up. Hey, welcome back, guys. If you're new around here, if you're enjoying this video today, make sure you hit like, make sure you hit subscribe, click that bell icon so you get the notifications whenever I post new videos. Today, we're going to be jumping into this video on how to actually set up Postgres like you would in production. And the other thing you guys could do that would really help me out is if you could jump on over to Instagram or to Twitter, give me a follow on there. That'd be awesome. Trying to make sure we get the word to more people. Really trying to make sure that we can start something here that's going to be like a real advocacy for the profession and make sure that when people are working with data, it's not just we're trying to turn on a database and crank something out as quickly as possible. It's that we're actually thinking about what we're doing and putting as much emphasis and rigor into the architecture for our data layer as we do into the other layers of our applications. Or if we're doing a data warehouse, maybe somewhere where there isn't an established data management practice, that we actually give some really detailed thought and consideration to how we can do that in a manner that's going to be sustainable and make sure we're set up for success in the long term. All right, now that that's all out of the way, let's jump into the cool stuff. All right, guys, so let's jump into this here. So the first thing that we're going to do when we start working with our project here is we are going to make a new directory. Now, throughout the entire course of this tutorial, I'm going to be using an SCM tool, that's source code management. And the reason I'm doing that is because after this video is over, I'm actually going to put this code out on my GitHub so everybody can grab it, follow along with it, make changes as needed. GitHub is what I'm using. Anything else you want to use, whether it's Bitbucket or any of the other ones, they're all probably going to work fine. If you don't want to use a source code management tool, it's not going to really stop you here. This is an easy way for me to make sure that everybody can follow along. What we're going to do is we're going to make a new repository. I am going to be creating it using GitHub Desktop. I really like GitHub. There's a lot of different options that you could use for an SCM tool, but GitHub is my favorite, and I like to use it with GitHub Desktop just because it makes things a little bit easier. I don't remember all the Git commands. I don't expect anybody else to ever be able to do that. It's just a really large pain to try to actually keep track of this. I'll publish this out to my remote repository. Actually, I'm just going to leave it local for now. I'll publish this later, and I'll make sure that you guys get a copy of all the code. All right, so now that that's done, let's go over here, make sure we have it. We do. So we're going to jump into our directory. That's not helpful. What in the world just happened? All right, so now we're on our branch. We can see that in here we don't really have anything yet. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to throw in a git ignore. Now you can use this using any text editor you want. I've spent years at the command line, just putting everything in from the command line, and you'll see that that's a pretty common thing with a lot of people in data. So I'm just using Vim. We're going to be using Vagrant for this tutorial. So what I'm doing is I'm just adding the dot directory that Vagrant's going to create, where it's going to store all kinds of stuff as we're going through the tutorial and telling it, hey, don't track changes there. And then it also tracks changes to like this weird Ubuntu file that just kind of like lets it know what's going on with your VM. We don't want to track those either because it's just going to clutter up our repository and make it where we're not actually looking at the code. So this is just a wildcard to make sure we get that file, regardless of what it's named. It starts with Ubuntu. We're going to be using Ubuntu VM for this. And then on the Vagrant, this double star here is going to make sure that we're not capturing anything out of that. We don't want any of those because they don't really mean anything to us. Now, if you want to see if that's there, you can do an LSLA. It's going to show you your hidden files. Then you should be able to see your git ignore. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to start working on our VM. Now, for this VM, I am using Vagrant with VirtualBox. So for anyone that doesn't know what Vagrant is a framework by HashiCorp that allows you to pretty easily go through and make VMs whenever you want to test things like you're actually working, in a production environment, but you don't want to put a whole bunch of network cards either into your tower, or you don't want to just work off a local host because you're going to end up with a whole bunch of issues. This is just a really easy way to handle that. The other thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be using VirtualBox with it. VirtualBox is from Oracle. It's free. And VirtualBox is what's actually going to generate the VM. And Vagrant is kind of what's controlling VirtualBox for the VM creation. The other thing is we are going to look for a box, and we're going to be using for VirtualBox, and it'll be around here somewhere. Of course, I can't see it when I need it, but we're going to be using the Ubuntu official release of 1804, which is in here somewhere. 16, 14, 16. Really? It's on page 2. Hopefully. There you go. All right, Bionic. So this is what we're going to be using. We're going to be using the official build for this. We're going to be using that with VirtualBox and Vagrant, and that's what's going to spin up our VM that we're going to use for this tutorial. So I'm going to jump over to VS Code. All right, and we're going to open up our GitHub directory. All right, so now that we have that opened up, the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to make a new file. Now, when we make this file, the name of this file is going to be Vagrant file. Now, the naming of this file is really important because if we don't have the naming exactly the way it shows up on the screen here, it just isn't going to work. So this is a standard thing out of Vagrant. This is just the way the file's named. And we're going to fill it in real quick. So let me grab my template for filling out a Vagrant file. All right, so here we go. All right, now this is a template that I use for every time I make a VM. This is going to be included with the code. Feel free to grab it. And since Vagrant is based off of Ruby, I've just used some, basic Ruby commands or functions to say, hey, I expect them to be putting everything in my GitHub directory within my files. So it's going to work off creating my host path, my guest path, everything like that, just based off of what's there. Now, this is a bit beyond the scope of what we're actually talking about in this video. So if you'd like to see an additional video on how Vagrant can be used to really help your data development, give me a comment. I read and respond to every comment. So let me know, that's something of interest. And that's something that, I can work on putting out for everybody. So the only things that we really need to fill out here, I already populated in that we're going to be doing a Postgres demo. We're going to change that to Postgres video 1. And we are going to give it an IP address. Now this is just for our local network. So for this one, I just have a range that I tend to use for development. So I'm going to go 173.28, 128.12. You can use whatever you want, just as long as it's not something else that's already being used on your computer. And then we're going to jump into our provisioner. Now, like I said, it is kind of important at some point, that you go back through and you understand what's going on here, but for the purpose of this, it isn't, just because all we're trying to do is stand up a really standard VM that doesn't have anything special going on with it, that's not stealing a whole bunch of RAM off of your computer, that's just going to install Postgres. The reason for that is whenever you're working with Postgres just on your local host, you end up with these things where it's like, oh, I have it on localhost, and then you go to try to deploy it anywhere, you try to work with it or anything. It just doesn't work. Where you have everything on localhost, and you have 2 Postgres servers, and you have to change the ports. Now all of a sudden one's not using port 5432. It's just much more comparable to a real scenario to do it this way. So now what we're going to do is we're going to drop in some code for our provisioner. I'm going to sample that from a different Vagrant file, which is what I need. All right, because I had already set this up previously just to make sure that when I walked through it, it wasn't going to completely just tank for no reason. All right, so what we have here is just a simple shell provisioner. Now this is Ubuntu, so this is a Debian-based Linux instance. So we're going to be using apt-get. So you want to use sudo just to make sure you have root privileges when you do this. Your sudo apt-get update is just going to do any updates that need to happen on the box. And then your sudo apt-get install PostgreSQL. That's just saying, hey, as the administrator for this VM, install Postgres. Now this Y flag is really important. This Y flag is going to make it so that all the things that you would typically have to go through on your screen and hit yes, 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 yes to actually get it to go along with, it's just going to do that automatically for you. So this file is looking pretty good. Like I said, it's a pretty straightforward file, so we're just going to save that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to jump over to the terminal here. We'll be able to see our Vagrant file. Now, since we have Vagrant on the machine, you can make sure that Vagrant is installed correctly with which Vagrant. Now, I'm on Mac. This is going to work on Mac, or this is going to work on any Linux distro. If you're on Windows, this may be a little bit different, but remember that this is all going to work. Vagrant works on Windows, and that's the reason why we're doing this also from a VM perspective, is you can use this on any operating system. It doesn't just have to be, oh, I have to have a Mac to do development. You can use whatever you have. So my Vagrant is mapped. So since I know that, what I can do is I can just say, hey, Vagrant up. Now, Vagrant up's going to do is just going to go out. It's going to grab my Vagrant file. It's going to look at all those configurations that are in there. It's going to build me a VM exactly the way I specified. So I'm going to let this go for a minute, and then we'll be back, and we're going to go in and start doing some security configurations and getting access to our virtual machine. Oh, hey, didn't see you there. Glad you're here today. If you're seeing this video, it means I either messed something up or we're waiting on something to load. So while we're waiting for everything to come back online, how about jumping on over to Twitter or Instagram and giving me a follow? Thanks, appreciate it. All right, so now that's wrapped up. Let's jump in and see what we got here. So to get into this, our command that we're going to use is Vagrant SSH. All right, so now we're over on the VM. Now to make sure that we actually did install Postgres, we can say which Postgres, which PSQL, sorry. PSQL is just a command line tool. So now to make sure that we can actually start the service here, we're gonna do sudo service Postgres start. Now, if you're using a different Ubuntu, not Ubuntu, if you're using a different Linux distribution, your commands for this are gonna look slightly different, especially if you're on like a Red Hat based one like CentOS or something like that. These commands are really different. But anything that's Debian based, this should look similar if not identical. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start it up and then check the status so we can see that we have Postgres turned on, which is great. So now that we have Postgres turned on, we're going to go through and we're going to update some settings. Now I'm on Postgres 10. So my configurations are going to be in the etc Postgres 10 main directory. You can get to that by using the cd command above. And once I'm in here, I'm going to have a handful of files. Now, the two that are going to be really important to make sure we pay attention to are the PgAdmin conf file and the PostgreSQL conf file. Now, what these are going to do is this is going to control what the server can actually listen to in terms of incoming requests. And this is going to determine what it does with those requests. So first what we're going to do is we're going to work with this Postgres conf file. Now remember, after we change these two, we are going to have to restart the server to make sure that the changes take effect. So the other thing to remember too, this has to be ran as administrator. So we're going to use sudo, we're going to do vi, because vi is on everything, and I know I'm not going to have to deal with that. And we're going to go to this file, and the setting that we're going to be looking for is listen address. Now you can see right here that it's commented out, and you can also see that what's going to be available there, if I do uncomment it, is localhost. Now you can get specific and put whatever you want in here, but realistically, we're just going to have the PgAdmin conf file actually control our security. So for the purposes of this, I'm just going to wildcard this just to make sure that whatever we are using in terms of the IP trying to access it, we don't have an issue. Then we're going to jump into our PgAdmin conf file, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger based on my screen. Oh, that's helpful, it didn't expand. So that we can see what's going on here. All right, now there's a lot of these in here, and we don't really need most of them. So what we're going to do is this local one at the top, you can leave it as is. We haven't set the database configurations yet, so we actually don't want to change that one at this point, regardless of whether we come back and do it later, because if we do, we're not going to be able to get in as the Postgres user, and then that's just going to make it where we can't actually fix anything. For the other users though, that's going to be included in all the Postgres is specific. So, it's going to make sure we still get that peer authentication for the Postgres user. But for the rest of them, I want to make sure that they have to authenticate with MD5, which is an encrypted password. I don't want to leave these default IP4 and IP6 ones in, so we're just going to comment those out. I'm going to get rid of all the replications because we don't need any replication stuff for this. And then the line that we're going to use to actually access this from our machine, it's going to be host. We don't need the, all right. And host just says hey, we're not on the server. And then we're going to say all, which means for all databases, all users. This is going to define the IPs. Now, what we're going to do here, instead of giving a specific IP that we would then have to, know the exact one of our, machine or whatever the case may be, since this is a demo, what I'm going to be putting in for it is SameNet. Now, since this is a VM that's on our local network, we are a part of the same network. So SameNet is going to let anything that's on the same network authenticate with MD5 authentication, which is an encrypted password. So that's done. I'm just going to save that. WQ is the write and quit for VI, and that's all my changes. So now we should be pretty good, actually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to restart the server. So I'm going to do sudo service postgres restart. All right, now I'm going to do sudo service postgres status. And I can see that I have a successful status. I've been up since 9 seconds ago, which is when I started it. So we're good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add a couple of users and change the settings.